how much hope, Ambassador Volker, do we have in implementing the Munich agreement at the end of this week, which is supposed to be a ceasefire as a result?
Yeah, I am very, very skeptical that that's indeed what we're going to see. The Munich agreement was an agreement among states that were present in Munich, but not involving the actual fighters on the ground. And I think they're going to see things very, very differently. Even since the agreement was reached in Munich, we've seen that fighting in and around Aleppo has actually escalated rather than gone down, including Russian airstrikes and Syrian government forces moving to surround the city. That is something that forces on the opposition side are going to continue to resist. So as much as the people around the table in Munich wanted to see something, the reality on the ground is very, very different.
Ms. Panova, it seems Ambassador Volker was trying to say the most unpredictable factor regarding implementing the ceasefire might be Russia's airstrike and also the Syrian government army. Do you agree?
Well, I would agree only with one thing, is that I'm also skeptical about the fate of those agreements, and there is a huge lack of trust between the parties. But I would say, how can we talk about any truce or any progress on the way to there when countries like Turkey or Saudi Arabia are starting an assault and aggression against the Syrian territory, against the Kurds, which actually also supported by United States. So it's also a strike against American interests. So I would say that inability America is performing to, let's say, to frame in its allies in this region and the lack of trust could be the main drivers or main obstacles towards the long-lasting peace in this area.
Okay, I have to have Ambassador Volker to respond to that.
Well, I think that she makes a very good point, that other actors are involved as well, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And what we've got in Syria is a situation where the government has been attacking the civilian population. The civilian population has taken up arms and is fighting against that. They're in many factions and many fragments, some of them supported by Turkey, some of them opposed by Turkey, some supported by Saudi Arabia. The U.S. has been conducting airstrikes against ISIS, which controls a good chunk of the territory as well, has been supporting some groups, but has been urging them not to attack the Assad government. And the U.S. position, I have to say, actually has been relatively weak. I wish we had been more assertive, more involved militarily at a much earlier stage. I think we could have had more influence at this point now had we done so.
All right.
As it is, I think it really is a very chaotic situation, and I don't expect the ceasefire to really come.
Well, we're going to talk about the roles of those countries just a little bit later, but now let's talk about the roles of Russia and the United States, since we have two of you with us, joining us from afar. So, Ms. Panova, the West has been accusing, especially the U.S., for example, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia has been accusing Russia of creating the facts on the ground in order to take advantage of the situation. Is that true?
Because the connection is not too good. So would you want to say that Russia is a primary
Let me repeat it again.
Someone to blame?
Let me rephrase it.
Yeah.
It is suggested repeatedly by both the U.S. and those in the West that the Russian bombing in the area has been against the people of Syria and would eventually lead to failure of any progress. Do you agree?
Totally not, absolutely. First of all, Russia has been a firm supporter of their stable peace process and peace talks between all the concerned parties, because you cannot say if Americans or Turks or Saudis do not like Assad, it doesn't mean that the people of Syria do not like him as well. There are different factions, different parties. Some of them support him, some of them support other factions. As you know, the Shias recently, I think, are somewhat modifying their positions in Syria in order to kind of be more not pro-governmental, but to talk to the government of Assad. So I would say when outside actors are trying to put into Syria the civil war, the distrust between the people, instead of their a dialogue, which Russia was promoting, that's where the trouble starts. And why Russia is bombing? First of all, we're not talking about ground troop operation, unlike other countries, but we're there in order to support the government and the people of Syria in order to secure them away from Islamic State that is threatening the true life and true well-being of the country.
Mr. Ye, you have been listening to the interactions between our two other panelists. What do you make of Russia's role? Former U.S. ambassador to Russia has been suggested it is creating, quote unquote, facts on the ground, meaning trying to take advantage of the new status quo. From your perspective, what is happening?
Actually, everybody wants to create a new status quo.
What do you mean by everybody?
Saudi and Turkey also have their plan. They want to deploy the troops. They also want to make the new status quo, and then based on this, realize so-called ceasefire, and then they can
you are
occupy
saying
the
everybody
part of Syria.
is equally guilty?
So I don't know. I'm not saying everybody is equal. We should say that the point of the Syria situation currently, one is ceasefire, another one is eliminate the terrorists. But just what in our discussion in this studio, just like the things happened in Munich, the people is not talking about how to eliminate the terrorists. They are talking about how to handle the Bashar Assad. I don't think this Bashar Assad is the key issue and the only issue to solve the Syria crisis. They need to find a plan to really eliminate the ISIL. That's the key issue they should do, but nobody really care about it.
Ambassador Volker, you are not doing the right thing, according to Mr. Ye here. The Munich agreement is not necessarily going to be a practical plan. It's not the focus that it is talking about.
Right, I agree. I don't think the Munich plan is going to work. Let's back up a little bit. One, Russia is an outside actor. Russia has established and expanded a military base inside Syria and supporting the Syrian government with airstrikes while they provide ground forces, and Iran provides some ground forces, and Hezbollah provides some ground forces. Two, the Syrian government has attacked the civilian population and has created a division between the Shia and the Sunni in the country. Yes, there are people in the Shia area, Alawites, Christians perhaps too, who support the Syrian government, Syrian regime. And then there are people on the Sunni side of the divide in the north and the west who do not support the government at all and have been attacked by the government using barrel bombs, using chemical weapons. Those people are going to fight against the Assad regime no matter what. And three, the United States, I think, has had unfortunately, a rather weak position in this. We've done airstrikes because our focus has been ISIS. We don't believe that it'll be stable with Assad in power, but our efforts to support opposition in Syria and to support them against ISIS have not been very effective. And we've not been very effective at building a coalition. I think it's a very disparate group, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Turkey, United States, others. And in that situation, I do have to say that the former ambassador to Moscow, Mike McFaul, he's right that the country most effectively shaping things on the ground is Russia working with the Syrian government.
Well, on the other hand, people are saying the U.S. is accusing Russia of all these quote-unquote wrongdoings only because U.S. is not having an upper hand over Russia at this moment in terms of the issue of Syria. Once you guys are having an upper hand, you are not going to accuse anyone. And also some people say the whole mess has been created by the United States to begin with. Look at the war in Iraq, which has been having all of these chain effects all over the region.
Well, again, I'd back these things up a little bit and just look at them. Iraq, was a separate conversation. It was reasonably stable by around 2008. The U.S. began to pull out. As the U.S. pulled out, sectarian violence flared up again. In Syria, however, it was quite different. In Syria, you had peaceful protests that were urging reform and change inside Syria. The Assad government went after those people violently, breaking up protests violently, arresting people, torturing people, and eventually bombing cities inside its own territory. All you have to do is look at the pictures of Homs or Aleppo, where the government has launched these massive strikes against the people. That's what kicked off the civil war inside Syria. The U.S., I think if there's a blame to be assigned to the United States, it's for not having acted to stop the violence earlier and now trying to recover from behind with a very weak position.
Mr. Ye here.
Mm-hmm. Actually, just I agree with the ambassador saying that the American stance is a little bit weak, but I have a little bit of suggestion to that make this stance stronger, that send very clear information to the Saudi and Turkey to not send their troops into the Syria. The Syria has too many violence and they are not very helpful. Actually, now is the time for the international community not only test the Syria situation, but also the neighboring countries' attitude. Now we see too much.
Let me have Ambassador Volker to respond to that. Can the U.S. do that, and will the U.S. have the capability to do that?
No, I think one of the interesting things that's happened over the last few years is the collapse of U.S. influence in dealing with Saudi Arabia because of the Iran nuclear deal and Iran's involvement in the region, whether it's in Iraq with the government in Baghdad, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and the U.S. seeming to be trying to cooperate with Iran in some ways. Saudi Arabia is feeling very isolated and is not going to be listening very much to the U.S. to say, don't fight against Iranian interests or Iranian forces in the region.
Okay, now we are having some very interesting situation. Regional powers, of course, international powers, geopolitics, all involved. And also, your prime minister said from Russia, Ms. Panova, that there might be a possibility of a second Cold War because the Western countries have been all accusing Russia over the issue of Syria without a dialogue and real discussion. How much a danger is there of a second World War? Cold War, rather.
Well, before answering that, I would probably, there are certain reservations with regards to claim that there is a second Cold War now started, but I would say that certainly confrontation evolving, and we have to deal with that, and there is lack of trust between the countries. But let me jump back really fast towards what, to Russia, U.S. who's having upper hand in Syria and in the region. I would say, I wouldn't be so assured that Russia is having upper hand at this moment. It's like you don't want to overestimate yourself. But at the same time, I would say for United States, it's been a strategy for a long time, be it during the Cold War and especially after the unipolar moment has passed as well, that there should be, the United States don't have to win the war. It's enough to create insecurity around the borders of potential rivals. Take China and take all their situations that are in a large extent either inspired or supported by United States. Take Russia and take with their areas of Ukraine, Southeast Balkans, or now the Middle East. So I would say on the one hand, United States are benefiting from that, but taken they in a way lost the initiative. This could be damaging to their role because for them at the same time of putting their rivals down, it is important to still preserve this leadership role and the role of mediator or the one who can sort things out. But in this case, I would say Cold War is certainly, or let's say confrontation is evolving, but I would say it is it won't bring any good to the United States in this very case. So I would suggest, and I would say, we have to talk, and we have to start talking. It's not the Russia of the early 90s or late 80s, and we don't have China of their 80s, and those are serious countries, and I think America has to start taking us seriously.
Of course, Ambassador Volker, that is an analogy that the Prime Minister of Russia made, but do you think there is much danger of much sharper opposition between Russia and the West, especially the United States, even on this issue of Syria?
So your question about a new Cold War and about the comments by Prime Minister Medvedev. I don't believe that over Syria there is such a risk. The Syria conflict has its own drivers, its own issues. Certainly different countries have different interests. I disagree with our Russian colleague saying that the U.S. seeks instability, just the opposite. I think the U.S. is looking for a long-term, stable and secure solution, but also one that respects the interests of all the Syrian people, not just the Alawites. That being said, I think the issues of a new Cold War or confrontation between the U.S. and Russia or the West and Russia have more to do with Russia's actions in Europe. Here we've seen Russia invade two of its neighbors, annex territory, rebuild its military forces, violate countries' air and sea space, threaten nuclear strikes. And this is something where NATO and the U.S. have now begun to respond by reversing the decline in their military capacity in the area. That's something to watch. I think that's what President Medvedev was talking about. And I think here it is Russia's own actions that have brought this about. I hope that this does not lead to a greater confrontation, but at the same time, it is an obligation of the United States and NATO to defend their territory, should it ever be attacked.
Mr. Ye, danger of a Cold War?
In this part, I will agree with the ambassador in DC. Actually, I won't say this the crisis in Syria is because of the new Cold War. It's because of the field of the two world giant power, because they are failed to manage the situation, failed to solve the problem. But it's not good news for all of us, because even the Cold War is an order, international order. But if they fail this order or the chaos in any country, this means we are incapable to run the situation.
Can you, Mr. Ye, coming from China, give us 15 seconds to illustrate the role of China? After all, China is a world power now.
No, I don't think we are capable to solve the situation in Syria. This beyond the capacity, yes, in this part.
I see.